diet is one of the most important things in your life, and even before scientific research was a thing, people were thinking about what is good to eat, what foods cure various ailments, and so forth. And yet, to this day, we discuss the health of different diets and foods. Currently, the carnivore diet seems to be on the spread, and I thought about how to do this video for a while. Do I respond to some specific videos, or what is the best approach? But I think responding to dozens and dozens of papers individually would take way too long, so I will keep this more general and use more general arguments than in my other videos. So let's dig right in. A carnivore diet is essentially a reverse vegan diet. It's consumption of only meat and animal products. No sugar, no carbohydrates, no fruits or vegetables, no grains, only meat. Carnivore dieters claim to have alleviated or even cured many different diseases, some of them claiming they owe their lives to the carnivore diet. At the same time, they point out that the first heart attack only appeared after seed oils hit the market, and they quote-unquote expose the seed oil industry and holes in medical research. On the other side, medical professionals, nutritionists, neuroscientists, and especially epidemiologists point to the mountains of existing evidence that such a diet is horrible for health. But if so, why do carnivore dieters experience all those benefits? Who is right? Can they both be right? Is there an unstudied nuance to this topic? I will try to answer that in this video. Full disclaimer, I am not an epidemiologist, but I have tried my best to understand the research and will try to present the data in the most layman way I can, and hopefully, I have understood everything correctly. Firstly, I will look at the arguments of carnivore dieters. Carnivore dieters boast a strong library of anecdotal cases and reports of benefits experienced on a carnivore diet. Those benefits are even documented in short-term studies like this one, where people report significant improvements on their health, including cured diabetes, depression, anxiety, and many other problems. These benefits are not exclusive to carnivore dieters either. They stem from a long history of successful keto diet books, which have been a fad several times in our culture. Several educated people have spoken out about this topic as well and built careers on it, or used their platforms to promote the diet. Very many doctors have warned that the cholesterol story we have all been told is a lie, and this includes cardiologists and heart surgeons. They point out that we need cholesterol for synthesis of vitamin D, as well as crucial hormones like estrogen and testosterone. It's also a large part of our brains. They use cholesterol for various different functions. They also propose the lipid energy model to explain why LDL cholesterol rises on a carnivore diet and how that is actually a good thing, because your body simply uses fat as an energy source instead of glucose. So LDL transports that fat through the body and everything is okay. A cholesterol increase may even be temporary, as the body uses excess cholesterol to repair damaged cells. They also point out that it's leaner individuals that see a higher LDL increase than overweight people. An attack is also made on the seed oil industry, as carnivore dieters point out that cardiovascular issues did not occur before the year 1912. The Ansel Keys 7 countries study that attempted to explain this via correlation with saturated fat and consumption only found the link in 7 countries. All the other studied countries were omitted. Carnivore dieters claim this is a deliberate bias and cherry-picking to show only the data that supported the sales of the newly produced vegetable oils. Studies like this one also show that high LDL was actually inversely related to cardiovascular health. The people who had the most cholesterol were the healthiest, and this was done on over 60,000 elderly people. This study of a whopping 12 million people found the people with the lowest LDL ratios had the highest risk of health issues. Reviews of literature find that the Bradford Hill criteria for causality cannot be confirmed in the case of cholesterol. Further larger studies, like this one that looked at people specifically hospitalized for coronary issues, found that it was actually precisely at the supposed ideal cholesterol level that you find the most patients with plaque buildup and heart attacks. It wasn't the people with the highest cholesterol level. In fact, over half of the patients had cholesterol levels in the safe zone. Additionally, humans were carnivores for most of their history, and we should be more than used to eating meat foods and animal products. It makes no sense that we would suffer so greatly due to food we have always eaten. They also draw connections to animals, as wild carnivores do not have known plaque buildup, but captive carnivores being fed carbohydrates actually do develop plaque. The Inuit also famously survive on a very high-fat diet. Additionally, a study on fiber intake found that zero fiber intake resulted in the least health complications. This study of over 2,000 carnivore dieters found very significant health improvements overall, including several completely cured ailments that the patients had, especially diabetes, which seems weird, since meat is supposed to increase diabetes risk. There are also studies that show limited absorption of nutrients from plant foods due to the other contents of the foods. What about the people who are on carnivore and get a heart attack? The most popular idea is that if you ate quote-unquote unhealthy food all your life, switching to carnivore for 2 years is not enough to negate the bad effects. This recent study also found that people who eat meat are more likely to live to 100 years old than vegetarians and vegans. There are also some more extreme claims like that salt is actually good for you and so forth, and of course, the seed oil conspiracy is a huge part of all keto diet ideas. There are numerous arguments and many additional things I could go over, but at least I need to show that this isn't the same as feminism or trans ideology where arguments are pulled out of thin air, and you're just supposed to believe them out of empathy. These people actually come with a ton of proper scientific arguments for their claims with plenty of legitimate studies, medicine, biology, and history to back up their ideas, as well as thousands of people's experiences. But does all of this actually hold up? Does the army of anecdotes, several scientific studies, several books, dozens of influencers, many educated experts coming out in support, and all the seed oil conspiracy theory stuff actually amount to any conclusive evidence? Let's find out by exploring the other side of this coin. Epidemiology. Epidemiology is the actual study of human disease causes, distribution, and patterns. None of the carnivore diet influencers are epidemiologists, and this is a very important distinction, because unlike doctors and biologists who merely study biological mechanisms, epidemiologists are the ones crunching the numbers and data to find out what causes what and provide the information that other fields use to form medical opinions. It takes rigorous statistical analysis and doesn't rely on drawing conclusions from biological mechanisms. So what do epidemiologists say? Well, they agree with current dietary recommendations. Shocker. This recent paper on optimal dietary patterns for healthy aging mapped people and their adverse health events to their diets and created this heat map that shows the riskiest foods. Where were meats? All the way on the bottom, below every imaginable unhealthy food, below sweets, processed food and Coke and vegetable oils were found to be the healthiest oils. And this study also controlled for other lifestyle factors. Comparing a study like this with the study of carnivore dieters, the key difference is that the carnivores were collected from Reddit. This study is a collection of anecdotes and not a proper study. On the other hand, this study was done as an actual observation of people, and thus would be more reliable. But this is just one study. Researchers from Harvard, the same university that did this study on carnivore diets, also published this huge study that found meat consumption was very strongly linked with type 2 diabetes. And this was an actual proper study, with way more participants and way more controls. In my opinion, this vastly overpowers the strength of this study. Highest-level papers, meta-analyses find quite consistent links across many studies. The Mediterranean diet has proven to be effective in preventing cardiovascular events. The Framingham Heart Study, conducted by one of the world's top scientists, is also central to the cause. But I know carnivores will be quick to point out the conflicting interest of collaboration with big pharma that have a much worse reputation nowadays. In this study, you can see health improvements when changing your diet to the usual recommendations. Here you have video of participants from a gym who are among the healthier population already, and their health still improves when switching to common dietary guidelines. And sure, you can find some reports of people experiencing the same on a carnivore diet, but these studies have a bit more weight to them due to the experimental setup, longer monitoring times, controls, and so forth. The Mediterranean diet has a plethora of evidence for working as well. These papers are all high-quality papers that support it. But wait, what about all the studies about low-fiber diets curing constipation and other digestion problems entirely? Paul Mason's well-known speech gets attention for seemingly shattering the fiber myth. Well, his speech is based on this study, which was done on about 60 individuals and did spot this pattern. However, I don't know how he searched for the effects of dietary fiber, because here's a study on 17 million individuals that clearly shows dietary fiber significantly promotes health. And even if the no constipation relation was actually true, dietary fiber still prevents CVD, type 2 diabetes, and certain types of cancer. If I had to choose, I'd rather be a little constipated than have any of these. Contrary to Paul's claims, there are also randomized trials that have found many positive effects. Furthermore, it is known that a low-fiber diet cleans out the gut, and this is already used when preparing patients for certain medical procedures. It's not new. But patients are put on very short-term low-fiber diets to clean out their gut, and then they return to normal fiber intake. This is a good thing. Next, the claim that cardiovascular issues did not exist before seed oils is a total myth. Artery plaques have been found even in mummies. These issues have always existed, they simply did not have a name and it wasn't understood why they occur. And as for the heart attacks that carnivores get, studies clearly show that if you adjust your diet, you prevent or start reversing your issues. They don't progress further. Even if you smoked, after quitting, your lungs start to recover, and your risk of cancer is cut in half after 10 years. It makes no sense that several years on the carnivore diet would only promote the issues if it's supposed to cure them. This is a really hard cope. Seed oils are also proven time and time again to be healthy. It's counterintuitive since they are processed, but they seem to be a huge exception in processed foods. Just like nuts are intuitively a small snack, but we can see that incorporating several servings of nuts into your diet has numerous health benefits. The harm of saturated fat is not only really well documented, but we even know how to instill heart disease in other animals. Particularly pigs have a cardiovascular system similar to humans, and we have clear evidence of clogging and unclogging arteries with a diet change that simply reduces or minimizes saturated fats. We understand really well what the impact of just one serving of saturated fats per week does to the body. And replacing unhealthy fats with healthy ones has been proven to increase life expectancy and decrease all-cause mortality by a significant margin. This paper has a great chart about this that shows how much harm really comes from trans fats, and it's completely in line with the Harvard study. So the claim that saturated fats are good for you is false. I'd also like to point out that simply feeling good and problems seemingly going away isn't necessarily an accurate feeling. For example, smoking can calm people's anxiety and they feel better and more relaxed. But the damage from smoking doesn't become apparent until years later. You don't feel the damage immediately, and keto diets might be the same. Now, the topic of nutrition is incredibly vast, and I can only do so much in one video. I haven't touched on anything about nutrient absorption, iron regulation, or anything related to salt intake, ketosis, neural health, and so forth. There is also the crisis with fruits and vegetables becoming increasingly less nutritious over the decades. So we might be reaching a point where the recommended amounts of fruits exceed the recommended sugar intake, and that's a whole other issue. It's very difficult to be an expert in this field and consider the hundreds of variables, and it certainly takes decades of experience and learning. Be careful who you trust, though I decided to test these diets myself. I have tried the carnivore diet for about 2 months last year. Then I switched to a more vegetable-heavy diet based on dietary recommendations for 2 months, and I compared both with my usual diet for another 2 months as a reference. So how did it go? My experience with the carnivore diet was quite good overall. I felt very mentally clear and alert. My blood pressure dropped to a steady 115/75. My energy improved. I had no digestion problems or gas, and most interestingly, my ADHD almost completely went away. So in that sense, it was basically as described in carnivore diet stories. However, of course, my cholesterol increased dramatically, and after a couple weeks, I started getting random chest pains that I was a bit concerned about. Switching to a more vegetable-heavy diet left me hungrier, and ADHD symptoms returned. I had some diarrhea while adjusting to the new diet, and I felt more tired. But the chest pains went away completely. Blood pressure was still steady 118/78. And after adjusting to the new diet, things were quite fine. I just had less energy than usual. Going back to my normal diet, things stabilized and I feel normal, though my blood pressure is now well over 120, and I feel a bit worse than on either diet. So in summary, both diets tested worked for me, although the carnivore diet was a bit better overall in terms of feeling. It showed health concerns, however, that I couldn't ignore, so overall, I'll take tiredness of the recommended diet over unexplained chest pains. But I consider this a quite interesting result. If my actual health was going down, why did I feel so good? And why do so many other people feel so good on this diet? I know carnivores will now think I got proof that I felt good and many things improved, so obviously they are correct. Epidemiologists and doctors will look at this and think about the risks and negatives of the carnivore diet and recommend the vegetable one with some dietary adjustments to battle the tiredness. But who is correct? I actually have a theory that they both are. See, carnivores correctly notice the many adaptations humans have to eating meat, and it's possible that many human societies survived on very carnivore-like diets. Even today, some societies, particularly living in harsh winter conditions, survive on mostly meat. But the key factor is that life expectancy before modern medicine was quite low. Cardiovascular issues from improper diets start showing up much later in life. It's possible that carnivores are correct, that humans ate a lot of meat, and that we can feel good and thrive on such a diet, but only for the short lifespan of our ancestors. Whereas modern life expectancy is something we didn't adapt for, and carnivore/keto diets don't actually support longevity. We can also speculate this without the need for any scientific studies. We can argue about conflict of interest, or whether enough outside factors were considered and so forth, but a very simple, unbiased measurement is to simply measure the times of death of people who lived on certain diets. The YouTube channel Viva Longevity did just that. 100 influencers of different diets were mapped to their times of death, ranging everywhere from keto dieters to vegans. The channel also asked the carnivore community to find any example of a keto or carnivore dieter that reached old age. If we take out the vegetarian dieters, you notice a trend. Keto dieters die young, some even in their 30s. Almost no keto influencers have lived past 80 at all. But people on vegetarian and Mediterranean diets dominate the old age and represent essentially examples of centenarians. The only two that made it to 100 are ones who ate carbohydrates, 72 and 60 grams of carbs per day, respectively. And the high-carb dieters age gracefully too. A lot of them even still work and hold lectures at such old ages. You can check out the video series if you want a more detailed look into all the included people. But I think this is a wonderful chart that bypasses all scientific questions and issues and simply looks at the long-term results of such a lifestyle. It's very clear that keto diets are not at all pro-longevity, even though in the short term they might feel amazing. Blood pressure and cholesterol aren't called silent killers for no reason. So in the end, I would say that carnivore diets are useful for certain purposes. They seem to have health benefits and can be used as short-term cures or symptom management. Additionally, if your goal is to maximize your output and then die sooner, carnivore diets are for you, I guess. But if your goal is to live a long and healthy life, existing dietary recommendations are absolutely the correct choice. It may not feel quite as good as the carnivore diet, and it might be hard to avoid that delicious steak, but you have steady energy well into old age. Carnivore dieters are quick to point out that nutrition studies rarely account for or do not specify any additional factors, such as do people who eat more meat also smoke more? Are people who eat more processed food also less likely to exercise? Are people who eat more meat more likely to eat processed meat? It's very rare for studies to account for this, and that's fair. But a lot of carnivore diet experiences also don't account for other factors. Did carnivore work because of the meat? Or was the problem just one nutrient like added sugar or gluten that was causing the issues and carnivore happened to get rid of it? Could the effect even come from placebo? In the end, I think nobody is actually genuinely wrong in this debate. Carnivores raise good points. Their findings are definitely useful for medicine and nutrition, and we certainly shouldn't ignore positive anecdotes from people on this diet, so we can recommend it for specific conditions. But I would still be extremely careful with presenting things like this as a dietary recommendation. The carnivore diet probably only has short-term and not long-term applications. I only went through a couple arguments in this video, and I could have easily done more, but I think this brief summary is enough to give the main idea, just as I have done previously. I greatly sympathize with keto dieters. I love bacon. I love meat, and meat is a central part of so many foods, traditions, and culture that it feels like blasphemy to reduce or remove it. I know we all cling on to the tiniest bit of hope that meat is good for us. I certainly want to believe carnivores. But as far as I can tell, the science is unfortunately quite clear. Reduce meat intake. Feel free to discuss this further in the comments and see you in the next video.